MCMILLAN. She is a director of engineering at GitHub, and she's worn many hats, including community builder at the University of Michigan Hill, software developer, and managing director of a national nonprofit. Now, she is going to talk to us about offsite planning for the faint of heart. Allison, the stage is yours.
It's been a while for many of us since we've gotten together in person. It's starting to happen in some places. If you happen to hit that lucky week when things look okay, we plan and we cancel, we plan and we cancel, but people are really craving getting together in some way because there's something special that happens when we're together with others. A special something that happens when we take our brains and ourselves out of day-to-day work and responsibilities and think more broadly about things. I'm Allison McMillan, Director of Engineering at GitHub. I also have a podcast called Parent Driven Development, and I'm the board president of the Ruby Central organization. Think of the best offsite that you've ever been to. And if you've never been to a good offsite or one that you've enjoyed, you can also think about this in terms of conferences. You can ask yourself these same following questions. How did it make you feel while you were there? What was its purpose? What made it fun and enjoyable? What made it draining? And finally, what made it special, right? What was something that you walked away from that offsite with that was an unintended consequence? Offsites, especially for remote teams, but even for folks who are generally co-located, are really critical. They create connection. They bring alignment. They provide information. They increase engagement and enjoyment of employees and how they relate to the company and how they relate to other folks on their team. And yes, this can sometimes be more difficult to accomplish virtually. Virtually, you need to deal with a variety of challenges that aren't present in person. Things like home interruptions and it just being more difficult to get away from regular daily non-work responsibilities. Time zones, the time zones. And maintaining someone's focus when they're in front of a screen with way more distractions. When thinking about differences between a virtual offsite and an in-person one, the key is not to try to fully recreate an in-person experience as a virtual one, but instead think about what opportunities are available to you because you are remote, as well as ultimately what you're trying to accomplish and how you can accomplish that same goal, but with a different approach. Today, we're going to talk about 3 key parts of planning an offsite that can be useful whether you're thinking about one that's virtual or one that's in person. We're going to talk about goals, logistics, and that special sauce. So first, let's talk about goals. As with most things, knowing why you want to do something is incredibly important. What does your team or department need right now? What does your peer group need? An offsite can be any number of folks, and there are huge differences between planning an offsite for a peer team of 3 or 4 versus planning a company-wide offsite. An offsite can also have more than one goal, right? Maybe the goal is to walk away with a team vision and for folks to have gotten to know each other better. Maybe the goal is to share roadmaps with other departments and recognize where there are dependencies or where work needs to be done together in order for something to truly be successful. Maybe a goal is to ensure that everyone understands and can provide feedback on a roadmap for the upcoming year. The structure of your offsite will depend on what the goals are and how many goals there are. keep in mind, you likely won't be able to do everything that you want to do, right? So for example, wouldn't it be fun to do a mini hackathon, ensure folks are getting to know one another, establish some critical ground up buy-in around team culture, brainstorm, determine, and review a roadmap for the next year, ensure alignment with the broader company, have some fun and important team learning and knowledge sharing sessions, and have everything paced in a way that allows everyone to focus on each of these areas. But alas, that would take multiple weeks and not just a few short days in an offsite. You can weed out priorities and goals by also thinking about things like what can be done asynchronously, what can be accomplished in an hour-ish long team meeting or a series of team meetings over the course of a few weeks. And determine top priorities by thinking critically about what everyone needs to do together and what they need time and space away from the day-to-day in order to really dig into that issue. A critical part of an offsite is the fact that you are taking your brain to a different space. It's similar to how many of us probably take a walk when we're trying to think through something big or challenging. Or when you stop working on something and give yourself just a little bit of space away from it, that is usually when you get your best idea as to how to solve it. You mentally prepare for an offsite in a different way than you do day-to-day work. So it can be helpful to figure out what your folks can think about while having those daily distractions versus what they really need to be in a different headspace to discuss and move forward with. What are you trying to accomplish? How long can the offsite be? How often do you have offsites? So what needs to happen now versus what can happen in the future? How can you fit in the top things that you would like to accomplish? And based on these goals, it's good to do some advanced thinking about who will likely be doing the follow-ups or action items. Is it you? Is it engineering managers? Is it volunteers that you make sure to ask for at the end of each session or when you have your end of day action item recap? Depending on the goals of the offsite, you'll likely have a sense of which group of folks will generally be taking a majority of the follow-up tasks. And making sure that that group has the bandwidth to accomplish those next steps in short order can also help in determining what the goals are. Right? You don't want to do a ton of work at an offsite in an area, but then not have any time or ability to follow up on those results and outcomes of the offsite for a number of months. Right? You want to use the offsite outcomes to springboard, to move some of the critical items that you're talking about forward. So next is logistics. Logistics may seem boring, and it might seem silly to dedicate a whole section of this short talk to logistics, but you would be surprised about the tremendous effect having smooth logistics will have on the individuals attending the offsite. Logistics are all the little things that people have to think about. The things that take up small bits of mental energy and capacity. For those of you familiar with the concept of mental load, this can be similar. The small unintended consequences of a million little thoughts and decisions that end up adding up when there are enough of them. These days, it's even more important to make the logistics portion of an offsite as easy as possible, since folks are already exhausted from the hundreds of small decisions that they're making every day, between regular normal things and then increased burden of decisions that need to be made daily, with the pandemic factoring into each of our lives in varying ways. You want to make it as easy as possible for folks to show up to the offsite ready to go. set the stage. Make sure that folks know what to expect. They should be aware of the goals, the agenda, the timing of everything, when there will be breaks or when there will be longer sessions, any links to virtual platforms they might need. Because I'm usually accommodating a variety of time zones, one thing that I've found successful is planning core hours and then time zone friendly sessions where we often repeat similar content, but at different times so that folks can attend the time zone that fits most within their usual work schedule. I will also make a note of when we'll be trying to power through a meal time in a specific time zone, or when we may push to finish a session resulting in a late lunch, for example, for a specific time zone. By making note of this, I'll explicitly call out something like, US East Coasters, make sure you have a snack handy because we won't break for lunch until 1 p.m. Eastern time. This allows folks to be caffeinated, prepared, and able to focus on the sessions at hand, as opposed to wondering when the next break is or the fact that they really wish they had something to munch on. If you're planning an in-person offsite, you can collect airlines and arrival and departure times for your team and put them into the same issue or doc where you have the agenda and other information so that folks can potentially share rides to or from the venue. For in-person offsites, I'll also sometimes include a suggested packing list or a note about what the weather is likely to be. Thinking through the logistics is a great way to get folks into the offsite mindset. For virtual offsites, I add travel days on Monday and Friday. When you are traveling to an offsite in person, just the act of traveling gets you into a different mindset. You're physically going somewhere different, and you're likely thinking about the next few days and what to expect. For a virtual offsite, I encourage folks to use their Monday travel day to wrap up whatever feels like a loose end so they aren't distracted by it for the rest of the week. To do something that helps them feel like they're entering an offsite mindset. Sometimes this is a long walk or bike ride or moving their station for the week to a different place. It can be all sorts of things depending on what helps that person get into an offsite mindset. I then run through a practice tutorial that I set up so that folks can practice using whatever virtual whiteboards or tools we'll be using throughout the week in our sessions. And take the time to read any pre-offsite suggested material or recommended reading. Whether an offsite is in person or virtual, it takes a different sort of energy, especially these days, to participate in fully. So Fridays are a chance for folks to process the last few days, to fill out the post-offsite survey, to have casual chats or virtual coffees with folks that they've met or learned more about throughout the week, and continue interesting conversations that they've had. Finally, a very sort of quiet but important part of the logistics is ensuring that everyone else knows that your folks will be unavailable for the week. This usually involves a few key emails, some Slack channel statuses, and other ways in which you can let others outside the department know that we won't be responding or will be really slow to respond during the week. Creating that space and making sure that it's visible to the team helps the team also feel like they don't have to jump into things that they might be pinged about over the course of the offsite. It helps widely manage expectations. So at the end of thinking through logistics, you want to make sure that the offsite attendees know exactly what to expect, both in terms of content and general flow. That peer teams and others at the company who may depend on your team know that you will be engaging in important offsite work. offsite attendees and that offsite attendees have been given a variety of opportunities to make sure they're fully ready to participate in the week or days ahead. Finally, for offsites to be memorable and impactful, they've got to have a little bit of that special sauce or sparkle. Beyond taking the time from the day-to-day and putting yourself in a different mindset, it's important to make offsites feel special and fun, adding a little bit of whimsy to whatever you're doing. This special sauce can take a variety of forms, and they don't have to be expensive. They just need to be thoughtful. So today I'll talk to you about the top ones that I incorporate into everything: gifts, experiences, and facilitation. First, gifts. For virtual offsites, I never like to assume that everyone has all the materials they need for an offsite, right? Me, I've got it all. I've got Post-it notes, I've got whiteboards, I've got whiteboard markers, I've got notebooks, everything, mainly because I love office supplies, but not everyone does. And so first and foremost, I make sure that an individual's gift box, I sent a gift box, I make sure that it includes whatever materials they might need for the week. Beyond supplies, I've actually found that I have a little bit of a formula that I follow because it provides the basic components of what I want everyone to have during the offsite. A little bit of fun, a new way of looking at a leadership lesson of some sort, some sustenance, and something that allows us to bond and use a different part of our brain. So here are some examples of what fits into those categories. For fun, I sent a whiteboard headband, which also doubled as a great way to get like a small whiteboard as an office supply into people's hands. It was used hilariously throughout the offsite. Light box behind me, that's another example of something that I set for some fun and some whimsy that could also be used during the offsite. While many of us frequently read leadership books or books about management and communication, the core of many of those lessons can be found in children's books as well, framed in a way that's really approachable, short, and honestly beautiful. So I like to send a children's book. I personally always pick a children's book with a character of color as the main character. I'm sure it's something that not a lot of folks notice, but it is a tiny way to incorporate and normalize the importance of recognizing people from diverse backgrounds. I'll often take an excerpt from the book or a core concept from it and weave it into my opening when I'm framing up the offsite for attendees. Recently, I've provided an arts and crafts kit, which is a ridiculous amount of fun and provides opportunities to do super chill craft times or fun activities, one of which I'll talk about a little later. This is also a huge win for folks who have kids because there's way more supplies in these kits, even the really small ones, than what one person needs during the offsite week. And then finally, a snack. I've done a couple of things. I've gotten everyone the same snack using like a vendor from Etsy before, or even gave folks a few options and then sent them their snack preference. Again, something that's small, but really thoughtful. And if the snacks are interesting, they can be a great conversation starter. Sometimes, if budget allows, I'll also get some sort of like department or team branded swag. And I found that to be fun, but also sort of unnecessary. In addition to the boxes, which not including the person, I'll also allow folks to expense a few meals throughout the week. Again, not necessary, but a nice to have if your budget allows for it. To push the usefulness and fun of these gift boxes one extra step, when I ship the boxes, I'll put the person's name and the company name. Then I'll ask folks to put these boxes aside until the Monday of our offsite. On our Monday travel day, I encourage folks to do unboxing parties, right? Where people can spin up a Zoom, have others hop in, and they'll open up their boxes together to check out what's inside. Again, creating small ways for folks to connect with one another. This gets a little more complicated as you deal with more and more countries, but it honestly isn't too bad. And at the end of the day, I find that it's well worth the effort. Now let's talk about experiences. Almost every in-person offsite involves some sort of team experience, whether it's volunteering, going to a baseball game, heading to a delicious, more special dinner, or one time I did a metalsmithing workshop. There are lots of fun opportunities. Virtually, these experiences can be a little more difficult to find, but there are some really, truly fantastic ones out there. For these, I highly recommend Airbnb virtual experiences. There are other options, and again, budget depending, there are some options to work with companies that will like send a kit to folks in advance and then host an interactive session. But Airbnb virtual experiences are we've done a variety of them, from simple art and drawing exercises to chocolate making to sandwich making. You can have folks expense any materials they need up to a certain amount. And these experiences frequently offer private group sessions and discounts. Experiences, virtually or in person, are frequently what lead to the inside jokes, the banter, and the increased camaraderie between folks. And again, you can find experiences at a huge variety of price points. Finally, and maybe the most important piece of special sauce, is really focusing on engaging and interesting sessions through thoughtful facilitation. This may be the most difficult part of an entire offsite, but if your whole offsite is filled with frontal presentations where people are just sitting and consuming information without interacting with it, I can almost promise you that it will be in one ear and out the other. And this is even more true for virtual offsites, where you're already competing with a number of other things for people's attention. So what does thoughtful and engaging sessions mean, right? What does that look like? It means that folks are participating in the conversation. It means that depending on the size, you're using breakout rooms. I also highly recommend some sort of interactive tool like Mural. I'll give a couple of examples, both focused around having a conversation about communication, but one that happened in person and one that happened virtually. Balloon building. Okay, so this one was in person. The balloon building game takes on many forms. The idea is to build the tallest, most cost-effective tower using balloons and tape within a set time. There are lots of variations of this. Some include that it has to be a freestanding tower. Sometimes the balloons are blown up in advance, and sometimes they aren't. Sometimes you can do the same tower building concept with things like toothpicks and marshmallows or a variety of other materials. So I split up the group into 3 groups, each about 5 or 6 people in them, I believe. They each had 15 minutes. 5 minutes for planning, where they had to pick a team leader and discuss how they wanted to build their tower, and then 10 minutes to build. Now, here's the tricky part, although the really fun part if you're the facilitator. After a few minutes, you as the facilitator throw in some curveballs. So the first one that I threw in after a few minutes was that the team could no longer verbally communicate, right? Slack was down. The second, after another few minutes, was a reorg. So they could talk again, but 2 people had to switch teams and join the team station to their right. I think there was a third curveball that I threw in, but honestly, I can't remember what it was. At the end, there is a scoring system where you can add up the materials used, the height of the tower, etc., to determine who wins. But the whole activity is really fun. And the most important part is the discussion that you have after. Which parts were most difficult? When you got reorged with one teammate and had to join a new team, how did you feel? How did the team welcome you into that group, if at all? Or were they just focused on getting their tower built? How did your team receive new members while you were trying to, within a set amount of time, really focus on getting your tower built? It leads to some really great realizations about how we communicate by ourselves and with our teams when accomplishing a goal. Another similar example is this one, which I did virtually. So for this one, I broke everyone up into groups of 3. Each group had to choose a builder, an architect, and a guide. Everyone took out their craft kits, remember the ones that I sent in their boxes. I put architects into their own breakout rooms, and they had 5 minutes to build a small craft using only their crafting materials. They didn't know what it was going to be used for. Then the guide was let into that breakout room with their one architect from their group. The architect had 5 minutes to show the guide the craft. They could not explain it. They could simply show it from any angle. And they could also the architect could also take a few pictures and send those pictures only to the guide on Slack. Then the architect took the craft out of the video frame and the builder was let into the breakout room. So now you have the guide, the builder, and the architect all in their own breakout room. Groups had 5 minutes to get the builder to build the craft that the architect built so that it would be as close to the architect's craft as possible. And guides and architects could both talk, but they couldn't talk at the same time. You can also throw in some curveballs here, although it's sort of tough enough already. So then we came back as a group, and each group revealed the architect's build and the builder's build, right? And you can see some of those here, ones that were closer, ones that were a little further away. And then again, we talked about it, right? What was more difficult than anticipated? What was easier? What of this activity could have been easier in person versus more difficult in person? There were lots of conversations about how complicated the thing that the architect chose to build was, and how they would have built something differently if they thought that they were going to have to explain it to somebody without showing them. So that was a lot of fun. But yeah, the whole activity was a ton of fun and a fantastic conversation. For other sessions, we've done a lot of post-itting individually and then broken folks up into groups to further discuss, then come back together into a large group and talk briefly about where their group landed or what they talked about, especially around things like OKRs, roadmaps, brainstorms, and more. And even though I may be the one putting together the offsite, I am absolutely not the only person facilitating these sessions and coming up with these sessions, because it's really important that there are a variety of voices and perspectives throughout the offsite. Some great resources for making content more engaging is the Loom Institute, which provides, they have cards, they have books, they have workshops on this material. There are also a variety of trainings out there that help provide tips, tricks, and hints on making virtual offsites and sessions in general more engaging. I participated in one by a company called Lizard Brain, which I thought was fantastic. But again, you can find these hosted by lots of folks. There are also certifications these days around facilitator training. And then one last resource I want to mention is a great talk that my colleague Neha Batra did on facilitation, which gives a ton of helpful hints and things to think about. So what have we learned today? We've learned about goals and knowing exactly what you want an offsite to accomplish based on who's participating and what the key problems are. We've learned about logistics and making it as easy as possible for folks to show up to the offsite ready and prepared to participate. And we've learned about that special sauce, right? Thinking through what items you provide, what experiences you provide, and what content you provide. So we're all virtual. I'd love for folks to hop into the hop-in chat for this talk and write one thing that you want to try the next time you have an offsite. I can't see them right now, but I'm really excited to check out what people say in a little bit. And now for some homework. As you go through your next week at work, think about the meetings that you're sitting in, or even the ones that you're leading. Which could be solved more effectively through a thoughtful offsite? Which meetings do you stay more tuned into for the entire time? And which are the ones where your focus wanes or where you can see other folks' attention waning? These can help you think about how you want to frame and execute your next offsite. You can do it. It's going to be great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a really awesome talk. It was really great, and I already have some questions for you, so we can go ahead and jump right in if you're ready.
Fantastic.
It was mentioned that offsite planning starts with the why. When can you tell that a problem or topic requires an offsite event to tackle it better? Any guidelines for deciding, maybe a checklist?
That's a great question. I don't know if there's a checklist, but I would say I'd say two things. One, if you find yourself or your team coming back to that issue, or sort of like not being able to get deep enough in it in a short period of time, right? Like an hour or 2 hours, or if you feel like you make a decision in that hour and then it keeps being revisited, or the problem or the pain point sort of keeps coming up, or there's still not, if you're reviewing a roadmap, like folks still don't have full understanding, those sorts of things. And then the second is what things that come up in a meeting that people really feel like they need more time and more space to think about, right? There are certain decisions you can make or things that you can talk about just while you're doing all of your day-to-day stuff. But there are other things where when it comes up, you're like, oh, I really want some time and some space to think about this. And, the whole peer group needs a little bit more time to like digest the problem and what their thoughts are about it in order to come together. And it's, especially for managers, but also for ICs, it's hard to make that time during the day and block off like, this is 1 hour of thinking time, because I don't know about you all, but oftentimes my thinking time ends up getting scheduled over with meetings. So, it's like creating that space.
Thank you. I think that's really helpful. There are some other questions with lots of likes here. Some people, especially in the tech department, are reluctant to dedicate attention to the opportunity of development in offsites. In other words, they are quick to neglect prep and evaluation. Any advice to motivate them?
Yeah, it is true. Getting folks to prepare for an offsite it's one of the reasons why I do the travel days, right? Because it's like, look, this is a whole day that is dedicated to you, being able to look through this material, please review, etc. I also am really intentional about what material is provided, like what do people need to prep, really making sure that it's like the key bullet points or the key parts of information if I send my department a 10-page strategy doc and I'm like, hey, read this and come prepared, it's like the chances of 60% of folks doing that are even pretty low. Now, if you do have a longer doc that does need to be consumed and there is no way to make it shorter, I think that one thing that you can do is sort of block out the first 5 minutes of a talk, or plan a break before that session and say like, hey, if you haven't had a chance to review this, please read through it, over this time, or even in the first 10 minutes, say, we're gonna, this works well with post-iting, because you can say, we're gonna take the first 15 minutes to post it. If you have read the document, great, start like tossing your ideas on our, interactive tool. If you have not yet had the opportunity to read the doc, please, read it now and throw your thoughts on the board.
Right. Thank you very much. And one more question with 5 likes on the table here. Love the idea for giving gifts to participants. Me too. Do you have any suggestions for more eco-friendly options? I think most things you mentioned as gifts may end up in a bin shortly.
That is a good point. I try to think about what is sort of useful both, at the offsite and in the future, right? Like the arts and crafts kit is sort of, it's a fun to have. I happen to have a lot of parents in my department, so I know all those craft kits get used. I think that you can definitely find eco-friendly options, or as you're thinking about what you want to send to your folks, you can think about, okay, what is fun that accomplishes a goal that's also useful. What do people maybe mention casually in conversations, or get really excited about when it comes up in Slack channels, or in icebreakers. So there are definitely options. I think what you send sort of depends on your group, how big or small the group is, what your budget is, all sorts of stuff. So that's what I showed was sort of the formula that I usually use and what I like. But there are tons of different directions that you could go with it.
For sure. Make it your own.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming and sharing your awesome tips. We have a little gift for you. We hope this will be an evergreen in your house. We will send it to you after the conference. Thanks again for sharing. I hope you can stick around for the rest of the conference, and thank you for coming to speak at Stretch.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.